Welcome to another episode of Dr. Kamini Rao's Masterclass.
Yes, I mean, I was somebody right from childhood. I was a very determined person. I would read a lot and read not just storybooks but a whole range of books and try to understand human behavior, history, what is happening in people's lives. So I think I was sort of, driven and gradually sort of going towards a field which is more people oriented. So since then the journey was awesome, and I think they are now really happy that they encourage me despite all their misgivings and the family's apprehensions about getting me into medicine.
Yeah, but when you say that you got into medicine, I think to serve the people perhaps, and perhaps understand people.
Patients appreciate that a lot. I've got a lot of feedback from them saying, you don't sort of label us within the first half an hour or first 20 minutes. Don't say we have depression, we have anxiety, give a pill and just give it. You are able to listen to us, you're able to understand us.
But as soon as a person walks in, the way you greet the person and the way you recognize the person, if it's a follow-up, if you've been able to recollect what you have actually spoken earlier and say, welcome and how are you feeling today?
Discussions about the body, about reproduction, about sexuality, both with girls and boys, need to start much earlier on and not wait for menarche to happen and then everybody panicking and saying, oh, she's got her period now, today she can't go to school tomorrow. So she came to us with severe anxiety and the fact that she was not able to emote with her baby at all. Most of her emotional energy was related to the anxiety, and she was told all kinds of diagnoses were given to her. Finally, she searched us out on the internet, she came to us. Even in the first meeting, she met somebody else. It was diagnosed as depression. And then she came to me and I was like, this is not looking like depression. There's something else going on. And when we spoke to her, she said, this is what it is. I have gone through so much trauma. I always told myself, there should be no girl child, there should be no girl child are vulnerable. It's something that I was conditioned to. I went through abuse till I was 16 years old. My sister went through abuse till she was 14 years old. Both of us told our parents they didn't do anything to protect us. So I don't want girl children.
Why does this happen in an Indian society? When girls are abused, why do parents not take adequate precautions?
I think it's because they fear stigma more than the girl's well-being, the child's well-being. It's become more about, if I tell people, then people will talk badly about us. Many times it is because it's a very close relative. Sometimes you're financially, emotionally dependent on that relative who's exploiting your girl children. It's a family honor thing. Like, even if I tell him, how will I confront him? What will happen if he says no? More than anything, I think a child, when she tells her parents or anybody that abuse has happened, many times the mother will say, uske saath akele kyun the? Why were you alone with her?
So,
so again blaming the child, aur jate yaake oble diya, rather than saying, oh my God, child, tell me more about it, this should not have happened, what a bad thing to have happened to you, I'm here to protect you, I will make sure it doesn't happen again. That is what the child wants to hear. But I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, the child does not hear. In fact, they say that the way disclosure is handled about sexual abuse is one of the best predictors for better mental health in a person who's been abused. Now that itself is not handled properly, because it's all about hiding, it's all about fact finding, it's all about determining whether it was true or not, or the girl simply saying, and it's about protecting somebody else rather than the girl. All that girl wants to hear is, it's not your fault, it should not have happened to you, and I'm here to be there for you, I will protect you that it will not happen again. This does not happen. So I think these are some of the things that society needs to change, and much more massive education about some of these things and not hiding it under the carpet.
What is the role of the father in these kind of sexual abuse in their daughters? I mean, do you think that the father should also play a very active role in this?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, usually these things are discussed with mothers or sisters. Father never comes to know. In fact, the mothers will not even tell the father, saying he'll get angry, he'll get upset, or he will go and confront, because men deal with conflict through some sort of aggression. So the mother may be worried about that. So father never gets to know. But I think right from the beginning, talking about sexuality, sexual abuse, or any of these areas should be something which the father also should be completely party to.
In fact, getting onto the same subject, Prabha, I've found that when such kind of sexual abuse has taken place, these women hate to get married, one, and secondly, if they are forced to get married, we found them to have vaginismus, and they come to us with this kind of primary infertility, and believe me, it takes a long time for them to get converted, and then even for a per vaginal examination, it is very, very difficult. And these people, the husband, if he is very understanding, will say, okay, fine, we can go through some other methods, like for example an IUI or say an IVF. But those who are not understanding, they will even ask for a marriage annulment. And sometimes either which way, damned if you do and damned if you don't. And this is the situation. Then again she goes back to her mother's house, and again she gets blasted. So where is the justice for this woman?
You're so right, and I'm so glad you brought this up, because a lot of women who come with primary infertility actually come because of non-consummation of marriage.
Absolutely.
And many times when you trace the non-consummation, it is related to the fact that there has been abuse in the past. So and it surfaces at every time, because any time the sexual activity is attempted, there is obviously freezing, because you see the body remembers. Even sometimes if the woman does not want it to happen, the body remembers. The body will remember how it was touched, and then the part of the brain, which is the fight and flight part of the brain, actually again sends signals and saying your body is being threatened. These women will have problem later when it's, when it comes to sexual activity. They will have problems, like you rightly said, when there's you're assessing, the obstetrician is assessing, or the gynecologist is assessing. They have problems in labor, because again in labor, lithotomy position, again a memory, of not being in control. That's something, there's danger. So many times it's, even if the woman is trying her best not to remember, the body is remembering and the body is reacting. So it's very, very important that girls be encouraged to talk about any abuse experience, to process it, to get mental health help, and to be acknowledged that this has happened, it should not have happened. So I think this is something which is so important. So while there are laws now for girls below 18, if something has happened, or children below 18, laws alone is not going to make a difference. Society has to change. Mothers have to be educated. Fathers have to be educated about this.
Another important area that I would like to discuss with you is that the new bride coming into the house with the mother-in-law there. So she leaves her home and comes into this new home. For her, everything is, different, it's foreign, and the mother-in-law suddenly feels very insecure that here is this girl coming, more beautiful than her, younger than her. So there is a bit of an attention shift. But more than anything else, she feels that the son who is always being doted upon suddenly finds that she's got two more people that the attention has to be fixed on. So she doesn't like to share her son in a way. But what happens is the conflict never gets resolved because there is no conversation. And if we don't have a conversation, how do you resolve? So if there is always a doubt in the mind, unless there is a debate, unless there is a dialogue, how do you change it? So how does a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law, invariably the jokes are always on mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Society also reinforces this concept that mother-in-law and daughter-in-law will always fight. So your Dil Mil program that you did was fairly successful with the two hearts, etc. Can you explain that program?
Yeah, so you're so right in saying that there's a stereotype of a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law. That the mother-in-law is against the daughter-in-law. And in fact, any talk I give in a group or an conference or something like that, I will talk about domestic violence, and one man, invariably a man from the audience, will say, but you know what, women are women's worst enemies. And it's the mother-in-law who will always be the person who actually victimizes the daughter-in-law. I'm always saying, think of that mother-in-law and the patriarchy that she's gone through, the trauma that she might have gone through, the insecurities that she might gone through. It's not condoning violence or any of that, but I think before you blame the mother-in-law entirely, always think what is her mental state. So that's when we did this Dil Mil project. What we found was that men were not engaging with us. There was a lot of domestic violence, but men were hardly coming to us. So we said, who can we take as the woman's ally? You know, who can we include? So we included the mothers-in-law. We called it the Dil Mil project, and they're like Dil Mil, hearts together, daughter-in-law, mother-in-law. And when we started doing groups with the mothers-in-law, we found that they had so many of their own concerns, you know, their own insecurities, like you mentioned, the trauma that they had gone through, the violence that they had gone through from their husbands, the fact that they were sent off when they were 16 or 17, married off, no skills. You see, when, like I mentioned about adolescence, when does a woman or a man develop better emotional regulation, better problem solving? Only in their 20s. So if you've had mothers-in-law getting married when they're 18, 19, 20, without even understanding how to manage their emotions, they come into this totally new family where they have to completely adapt. It's a very Indian phenomena where it is accepted and expected that a young girl will move into the husband's house, completely adjust to a new environment, new food, new rituals, new way of doing everything, and will just accept it and have no problems. I mean, how can you even expect? I always say, let a man go to a woman's house like this, to his wife's house, and stay there even for 6 months in a new environment. Let me see how he's going to cope. You know, it's like conditioning. It's like you are supposed to do it without ever thinking what this girl must be going through, taken away from everything familiar, you know, everything familiar to her, and put into a new place without anybody who's there to support and is expected to understand. Now, what I'm trying to say is this is transgenerational. It is from generation to generation to generation. So the mother-in-law has also gone through this. And yes, maybe she should be more empathic, but a whole lifetime of doing all this makes her also very emotionally vulnerable. And when there is a new girl and she feels, oh my God, am I threatened over here? Much of this is not conscious, you know, Dr. Kamini. It's not conscious. It's not intentional.
Subconscious level.
It is happening within. And I think that is why, like you rightly said, dialogues. To be able to talk to each other, to encourage to talk about emotions. We do not talk about emotions. How many times when a child tells us, I'm feeling scared, what are we saying? Oh, don't feel scared. There's nothing to feel scared about. We have blocked the child, you know. If the child says, I'm feeling shy, I don't want to do, okay, let me see, what is it that is making you shy? What are you concerned about? How many times are we doing that kind of conversation? Which means we are not talking about our emotions. We are not able to even label our emotions. I get women and men who come to me who don't know, are they feeling sad? Are they feeling anxious? Are they feeling fearful? Are they feeling angry? They don't have words to depict and describe their emotions appropriately. So they don't even know what they are feeling. Is it disappointment? You know, is it a lot of fear about the future? What is it which is bothering them? To even be mindful of that, to acknowledge that, to be able to say it loud, to say, I am scared, you know, I am scared that I will lose my son. And girl, that is why I'm scared of you. You know, I'm worried. You know, sometimes when I'm angry at you, it's not anger at you. It's anger at my life. And now more and more research is showing that transgenerational violence is something which is changing. Even there are epigenetic changes. There is methylation. So it's not just something which is social. The social and biological are getting very mixed together, and there is a lot of understanding about trauma which travels through generations.
So they have sort of legalized this trauma, saying that this is part of life and this is how it has got to be.
Yeah, without even thinking about it. You know?
But then if you look at the daughter-in-law, what she should realize, and with proper, you know, counseling, that what she gets, not only should she convert the mother-in-law, but she should not do the same to her daughter-in-law. And only then that vicious cycle will break.
So I think there the role of men is very important, because even now in our society, women do not have the kind of say or voice that she should have. You and I are liberated women. We are able to articulate our views. We have the language. Most women do not have the language. That's why they come with bodily symptoms. You know, They are not able to tell their emotions, that's why there will be pains and aches, you know, hata pava mein darad, you know, maikai novu, thale novu, sonta novu will come as a manifestation of their emotional distress. They don't have the language. So men are very important in this. Men cannot take a back seat. The father-in-law cannot be sitting and reading a newspaper when all this is going on. He should be also able to discuss openly, hey, what's going on here? The son should be able to say, you know, what's going on here? Let me talk to you both and talk about your emotions. So I think it's about actually being able to label, understand, articulate, and to have that conversation going about how are we going to resolve the problem. You know, you as a person I've known, you're a problem solver. You're a solution focused person. I think that's how we need to have our families. We need to be solution focused. We should not be constantly problem focused.
But historically, Prabha, we've seen families where the son is at a crossroad. On the one side he has a mother, on the other side he has a wife. And he escapes route is to say, I'll stay silent, I won't support you and I won't support her. So at the end of it, you sort out yourselves and come to a conclusion. And this I've seen in many families. To what extent does that kind of a role of being silent really help? In fact, it harms, because he doesn't want to take any kind of a role which is active, and so also his father, he also keeps quiet. So this is, whether you say epigenetic or whether you say that the social reformation has to occur, unless it is actually dinned in through a religious edict that the priests etc. say this is wrong and this is right, because you know, everyone who goes to the temple really does not actually pray to God. They are more gossiping over there, including the priests. So if the priests then say that women must be respected and women must be this thing, this is the place where you can bring that change. And having said this, I think the sons tend to get the cream and they get everything, and then they are scot free. So why should the daughter-in-law be a subject where everyone sort of puts it as a target and says that let her fight for herself?
Absolutely, I completely agree with that, and I think that, you know, some preparation also needs to happen. I think people, when they get married, especially if there's an arranged marriage in our culture, very often it is about looking at all these other kind of things, you know, status and other family similar, all of that may be important, but I think also it's about temperament, also about the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law having this conversation much beforehand and saying, look, you know, there may be differences, things may go wrong, and like, you know, we were discussing, it's not just mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Any two people living in a relationship will have conflict, but I think the important thing is how are we going to resolve the conflict. I don't think we should shy away from conflict. Conflict is going to happen. Two people are there, you're different, your upbringing is different, your thoughts are different, your ideas are different, but how are we going to resolve the conflict? Not by negation, not by saying she's not right, I am not right, but by actually having a discourse, a discussion about it, and saying, look, we want to make our family into a successful family, a family that is happy, you know, a family where pleasant thoughts are there. So let's not get into a blame game. Let's both have a conversation about how are we going to resolve this. You may have your insecurities, I may have my insecurities. Let's talk openly about it, you know. So
that's true, but then, you know, you've also developed a picture book, you know, so that people who don't have the, you know, the strength of the language, the picture books tell it all. So how did you come upon this picture book which actually gets across the message very, very well? How did you do that?
Yeah, so this was, I have done two projects. One is called the Mogu project, and that was a fascinating project. It was called, basically Mogu is flower bud in Kannada, so it is mental health of girls growing up, you know. And we talked to a lot of young girls in Bangalore and asked them, what are the things that bother you? What are the things which affect your mental health? They came up with a list. And then we said, how can we help you? You know, they said, we don't want some fuddy-duddy person coming and giving us lectures and we'll listen to it, it will go away. They said, give us stories, give us picture stories that we can talk to each other, so that we as peers can talk to each other. So that brought out a storybook called Mogu, and it has 10 stories of different girls going through different issues. It has about, you know, if the father is violent in the family? You know, what is the girl going through? A girl is very shy. A girl has a disability. You know, a girl is being followed by stalked by a boy. How does she handle it? How do I as a bystander friend handle it? So we've gathered these 10 stories, and we also have a note over there for parents, for mothers and fathers, saying you talk about this story and discuss it. So I think across the world, book reading with children has become, and young people, has become a very good tool, because there are things that you can't otherwise talk about, but when it's happening to a character in a story, it's a lot easier to talk about it.
Absolutely.
You know, so I think using these methodologies more and more. Then we did another study which was called the IMPRESS study. Now in the IMPRESS study, we found that a lot of men were smoking at home when women were pregnant. You know, with all these curbs on smoking in public spaces, what has happened is men are smoking at home, and women are pregnant, and we know the developmental outcomes on the baby, and I'm always somebody who's very concerned about the unborn baby. Talking to men about it, they probably, you know, poo-poo it. For them, it's not important. Even if you say your wife's health, it's not important. So what we did was, we came up with a picture book where the baby is telling a story. Okay, the unborn baby is telling a story to the father, saying, you know, Papa, I'm inside your wife's womb, and I'm just waiting to come out and see you. But you know, when you smoke, my environment gets very smoky. I'm coughing. And it's a cartoon character of a baby talking to the father about what is happening, you know. So what we did was, we did a saliva cotinine test, which is like a dipstick kind of a test, which is done very easily. So it showed the amount of cotinine that the mother had in her saliva, indicating that this is the amount of smoke which the mother has inhaled through you. And we had this baby, and we had a letter from the baby to the father. You won't believe it, most of the fathers were weeping at the end of it. You know,
really?
Saying, oh my God, I didn't realize that this was what was happening. So I think that we need to develop methodologies rather than advising and sermonizing, which will actually make people realize what is happening. And that is why I think mental health professionals have a very important role to play, you know.
Absolutely. A very integral part of any kind of treatment would be that counseling, because what happens is nobody wants to be blamed. Most people want to be told, how can I improve? And this is something which many people don't realize, and especially more so the doctors. The higher and the more important and the more famous a doctor is, the more judgmental he is, and that is something which we should not do, and very, very important. But again, looking at HIV, women that are stigmatized with HIV, particularly in rural areas, they go through tremendous stress, and that HIV was not because of their problem, it was actually given to them by their partners. How does mental health counseling help over there? Have you devised anything for that kind of group?
Yeah, so you know, I had the privilege of being part of the original NACO team, which went to Africa, like in the 90s when it had just started. It was such a revealing experience for me. I went to this little village called Rakai district in Africa, which was in Uganda, which was the most ravaged by HIV. And I sat there and I talked to the women, you know, through interpreters, talked to grandmothers who just had 2 orphan babies and their children had died. And I realized that apart from the physical part of it, the psychological part was the most important. And so when we came back from there, I continued to sort of, you know, work in the area, developed methods by which we can talk to women about these problems. And then in remote Belgaum, which is one of the biggest districts which had HIV, we developed a method by which we trained nurses, like basic nurses, not BSc nursing and all, nurses to use a mobile phone and to actually talk to women in Belgaum. So we were in Bangalore and we were talking to women who came to the you know, ART clinics in Belgaum, worked through with them for 6 months, taught them methods by which they can cope, you know, and help them. And then as a research project, we also looked at the viral load and the CDC counts and depression, and we found that women who were depressed really gained so much just by this. They had not seen these nurses face to face. It was all on the phone, you know. So some of these interventions, which are quite cost effective, which do not cost the government too much, can easily be provided, particularly to women in remote areas who are very vulnerable, who can. So many of the women would talk only in the evening, because they said that only after we finish all our housework and all, we can talk about these things. And so my nurses would actually stay on beyond their hours and talk to them till 8 o'clock in the night and help them through some of these, navigate these difficult paths. We lost some women died, you know, some women went on to marry another person, but they were on the phone, they were able to talk about their most intimate feelings. And we did, you know, looked at the process data later, what women felt about this intervention. They just said that we had somebody to talk to. Yes, we were getting ART, the physical health was being looked after, but the emotional health, which was so crucial, we just got through these phone calls.
Which is really good. At least mobile phone is not being blamed for everything. At least there's some good use of that. But having said this, now we must come back to NIMHANS. NIMHANS has actually been doing yeoman work, in fact, you know, in more areas, because it's diversified and it's got a lot of areas, particularly looking at areas in the field of perinatal medicine psychiatry. And I had always felt that the perinatal part of it had been neglected, and it's lovely to note that you've taken that up as a challenge. And putting this up in the government sector is an uphill task, because you know, it's easier to get it in the private sector because you can easily do it, but in the government sector, even if you've got trust money or donations, to use that donation money also you need a lot of permissions, etc. So, but the satisfaction of doing it in the government sector is that the needy people will get the benefit, and that is what we see. So how arduous was that journey to put this perinatal medicine with those 25 beds there? Because this is what I think we need now, and perhaps it should go even beyond 100 beds, because this is just the tip of the iceberg. We've still got a long way to go, because this has not been diagnosed. Many of these go undiagnosed and people even die, but no diagnosis is there. They'll say this person is mad or this person is angry. Even the anger management itself, people don't realize that there is some underlying cause to that. So if you really look at this, I feel somehow we must be able to educate our obstetric colleagues and the public at large, not to just label people as temperamental, because the vulnerability of our hormones for women during the different stages of their life is different. I mean, it's unlike the men, because even during the menstrual cycle, the premenstrual tension itself can cause a lot of problems. And how many men will really understand that the girl is going through a premenstrual tension, or even the wife is going through premenstrual tension? Because once she says, I'm going through premenstrual tension, so then be kind with me, then you know, they will okay it for 1 month or 2 months. Then the third month they'll say, you are your PMT and GMT, I'm not bothered about, now you just get on and cook and do this or whatever it is. So the sensitivities are not there with the men. So before we actually treat the woman, don't you think that the men needs to be sensitized to this kind of mental
absolutely. I mean, you know, to just sort of go back from what you discussed to my journey in a public health setting to start a service like that. One good thing is that NIMHANS is kind of open to innovation, so they are relatively more open-minded than many other public health institutions. But I still had a tough time, because this whole concept of rooming in mothers with babies when a mother is so ill was very alien. You don't find it in, you know, in medicine, right? If a mother is admitted for hypertension and she has a little baby, the baby will never be with the mother. Or if it's epilepsy, the mother will not. So most of our directors then were neurologists and neurosurgeons, and I don't think they really got what I was trying to say. Sometimes it's important for us to develop skills. So I chose to go to the UK. I chose to go to a center where there was one of the best mother baby units and perinatal psychiatric services. I would you know, travel nearly 1 hour from one corner of Manchester to another corner of Manchester, changing a metro, changing a bus, putting in a lot of effort and time just to learn the specialty, you know. I think that was one of the most productive years of my life. And I was always keen that I come back and set up the service here. So obviously they were very happy with me and they wanted me to continue as a consultant in the UK, but my heart was here and I said my country needs me, the mothers in my country need me, so I came back, and even then they were not convinced. So what I did was I started an outpatient service, and one of the things that you always have to show is evidence. So I showed evidence. The outpatient service grew in its leaps and bounds. The number of women coming were a lot. We started publishing our data, and then we went to the administration and said, look at this data. These are the number of women who need help. So when you show data, they can't say no, and then we were able to start. We were first given only one room. Can you imagine 5 beds in one room this size, baby, mother, cot, grandmother. Then I had to fight for another bigger place, got it, and now I'm really happy to say that we've been funded for a very nice, big, modern, state-of-art service, which will have all the ingredients which are there in France and Australia and the UK. And the unique part, which is very different from those countries, is that here we have a caregiver. We have usually a mother or a mother-in-law staying. So what we do is we take the opportunity there to encourage, to talk to the father, to talk to the mother, and to the mother-in-law, whoever is there, about the mental health problem. We also realized that fathers were not able to come during weekdays. So my social work trainee and consultant are doing groups on Sundays so that the fathers can come and learn. And what we realized, that the fathers were also so confused about what was happening, like their wife is like this at a time when the baby is so small. So they were also able to understand what is going on. Even in the outpatient, we have a separate dedicated time to spend with the fathers. So the journey was not easy, but we are now appreciated the world over. We are an international model for a mother baby inpatient unit in a low and middle income country. And I dream of starting a center for perinatal mental health, and like you said, maybe having 100 beds or more than 100 beds in one place to actually spread this out,
yes.
Into the country. And one of the joys that I have is mentoring younger colleagues in the specialty, and I keep doing that. So a lot of young men and women are very interested in perinatal mental health, because I think they've realized that by intervening with one mother and baby, you can change the society. Because when a mother is pregnant and she has stress and she's going through mental health problems, it's going to impact the fetus, it's going to impact the pregnancy outcome, and you're going to be able to change many things if you are able to help a mother in the 1001 critical days of a baby's life, 365 days in the womb, and 2 years out of that.
2 years out of that.
So that's a very critical, so if you're going to intervene with the mother right then, with the father right then, you can actually make a lot of change in society itself.
Absolutely. I think, looking at all this, I feel that mental health is so far neglected, and it is something that needs to be sensitized with our own profession first. Need not be only gynecologists and obstetricians, it can be pediatricians, because once the baby actually is out of the womb, the pediatrician takes over. And the worst part is during the neonatal period, and all the baby blues and puerperal psychosis, etc., is seen by the pediatrician, but the pediatrician is only concentrating on the baby. So the mother is not concentrated upon, and sometimes we have a problem. And once the baby is out, the obstetrician feels that their job is over. So this perinatal medicine is an important unit, and I would definitely recommend that most of our obstetricians have at least one visit of these patients where there is a pre-morbid condition, to have one visit to this perinatal medicine unit at NIMHANS, because at least an assessment can be done, so that if there is any change, the patient can actually get across and at least get an outpatient visit assessment and go ahead. At least you have a record. Because this is so important, because our statistics are so sparse and we need to have our statistics, and that is the only way you will get your statistics. We are very very poor in documentation, and we don't think that mental health problems exist because everything is hunky-dory, and this is something which we are almost like in a kind of situation where it's an epidemic which is waiting to erupt, which is already erupted, and we still don't even know it has erupted. COVID, we know it's erupted and because people are dying. Here these people are mentally dead and we don't this thing because they're breathing.
It's being called the hidden pandemic right
That's
now.
a hidden pandemic.
And you like very rightly said, I think mental health is too important to be left to psychiatrists alone.
It is the responsibility of the society.
Yes.
So I would also request my viewers, if they have a problem like this, they can actually get across to your center in NIMHANS, because this is very, very important. Because it's not only the length of your life or how many years you live, but quality of life is important, and people have to get across there. If you are only depending on your husband and your father and the family, why don't you get up and get yourself treated? And this is what I feel. So having this across, I feel we've had a wonderful session, Dr. Prabha, and I feel that you've done such wonderful service that even you're quoted in the Lancet, and there's so much of publications to your credit. I wish I had more time to interview you, because this is something which is like a storybook, and we know that people are all like children and every child wants a story, and as we go through these stories, it is something that will hit each and every one of us in the heart, straight to the heart and then to the brain, and this is what will actually stay in the minds of these people. I have really enjoyed participating in this discussion with you, Prabha, and I would like you to talk to our viewers, all the viewers that are watching this show, on what are obstetricians and gynecologists and the society at large, what is your message to them?
So thank you, Kamini, for having me in this show, and I think it's been great to talk to you, and I really enjoyed the way you brought out everything that was inside me to to the viewers and to talk to you. I think the message to me would be, one, to pay attention to your girl children much before they become adolescents, to start talking about their bodies, to start talking about their feelings, to help them to express their feelings better, to listen to them, to not be judgmental, to understand that reproductive life events are very important, significant events in women's lives, in girls' lives, and to pay adequate attention to them, to prepare them. Not to pay attention only when a woman is pregnant and say she needs food, she needs badam, she needs milk, but to be able to talk about their mental health even before they decide to have babies, to ensure that a woman is not just somebody who has a receptacle to carry the baby, but that she has a lot of emotions within her, to pay attention when she is going through any reproductive life event. Dr. Kamini will tell you how infertility is a huge problem and what impact it has on emotion. So a woman does not need to identify herself only as a mother. I think that's something else that our culture should understand, that she has many other facets and many other roles in life. And finally, for mental health to come out into the open, to be talked about in drawing rooms, to not hush difficult emotions and difficult conversations, for people to be able to talk about conflict and how to resolve conflict, and use a much more solution focused approach to lives. And like I said, mental health should become everybody's business, and a woman's mental health is everybody's business.
So thank you, Dr. Prabha Chandra. My dear viewers, that is Dr. Prabha Chandra for you. I'm sure you have all loved this riveting conversation. Mental wellness plays a very important role in complete fitness. Thank you, viewers. See you in the next session of Dr. Kamini Rao's Masterclass. The invisible coronavirus has been rampaging across the globe, bringing fear, death, and daily living restrictions. Each day we hear about more people testing positive for COVID-19 in our country. Studies suggest that COVID-19 may be even spread by people who show no symptoms. This is exactly why it is extremely important to take the necessary precautions to stop the spread of this virus. You have the power to save a life, save yourself and others from drowning in this pool of corona, because safety isn't expensive, it's priceless. Stay home, stay strong, stay healthy, get vaccinated, and of course, keep watching Dr. Kamini Rao's Masterclass.